friends. I'm your host, Erin Port, and welcome to the Simple Purposeful Living podcast. Life can be overwhelming and busy, so once a week, I invite you to join me, and together we will make simple tweaks to uncomplicate the hard parts of our life so we can spend more time doing what we love. Welcome back, friends. I hope you've had a good and relaxing week in between Christmas and now New Year's, and we are on the brink, just hours away from 2025. It'll take me a good month to write the date correctly. Remember when we used to write checks and you'd spend the first 3 months remembering that it was the date it was? Now it's just medical forms and things I need to remember the date, but it is 2025. It's going to take a little time. But as we depart and say so long to 2024, there is a lot to reflect. 365 days is a long time. And there's a lot that happens in a year. And I think it's really good and really important to go and look back and think about what has happened over the last year. One of my favorite things to do each Christmas, I've talked about this on the podcast, one of the first gifts that we open every Christmas is our yearly family photo book. And basically, I go through, it takes me longer than I'd like, but it's so good in many ways. And I go back and I just pick about 175 photos from the last year. But going back is so good because it's so easy to forget all of the beauty and the milestones and the fun that our family has had. And so then I go in and I use Shutterfly, and so it automatically puts things in order based on the date, which is awesome. And then I kind of fix it and change it around. I don't add a lot of words. I just kind of, winter 2024 and spring break 2024 and spring fun and all that. But looking back at all the things that the kids did, all the things that we did, all the highs and the lows is just a really great way to end the year. And it helps shape our path going forward, reflection does. So there are a couple of questions I'm going to ask you today. I did a similar exercise with my business coach, and then I used the same questions with my women in our adult Bible study connection group, and they found such value in it that I thought, I'm going to take a time. I'm going to set this time aside on the podcast just for us to reflect together. And I'm going to answer, but the hope is that as I'm answering, that you might also be able to reflect and take this time alongside me as we close 2024 with gratitude and move into 2025 a little more informed. So the first part of this is going to be about reflection. And the first question is, what word would you use to describe this year? So a lot of people, myself included in the past, have kind of set the intention for the next year with a word of the year, right? Instead of New Year's resolutions, you might choose a word of the year. And I've done this in the past. This year I didn't. But it was pretty obvious to me as I looked back on the year, the word kind of started to come to mind around October, that the word for me this year was accountability. So let me take you a step back. In 2023, my lifelong dream, one of them, has always been to write a nonfiction book. And as long as I could remember, that's something that I wanted to do, but it felt unattainable. Nobody ever came knocking. And so I finally was like, okay, it was my 40th birthday last year. I was like, if I'm ever going to do this, I've got to make this happen. And so I went ahead and I wrote a book proposal. That's your first step in writing a book. And I wrote it, and I had a friend, Crystal Payne, actually, of the Money Saving Mom. I asked her, like, hey, is there anybody that you know, literary agent, that would look at this? Anyway, I had another friend look at it, and they said, it's fine. I think that's maybe that. I don't know. I don't remember what they said. It wasn't like, wow, knock you out of the park, right? So you lick your wounds a little bit there. But she said, I think it has potential. Okay, so I dried my tears, and she said, I think you should hire a writing coach. Okay. And I was like, this is a lifelong dream. Like, if I'm going to, like, it's just like being an Olympian. In many ways, this has felt like training for the Olympics for me. I'm never going to probably ever train for an Olympics, so this is the closest. But if you have a goal to go to the Olympics, hiring a coach to help you and refine you. And so the same thing, I hired a writing coach, and her name was Ann Croker. And in the spring of 2023, through the summer, she helped me. We chucked the first one, and after I stopped crying, we rewrote a second one together. And then with her help, I was able to then take that to literary agents and interviewed with literary agents with my book proposal. I secured an agent in August on around my 40th birthday, and then her and I worked on editing it so that that was ready for spring of 2024. If you're keeping track, that is a year of working on a book proposal. And in March of 2024, this year, I got a 2-book deal with HarperCollins and Zondervan. And that was just like a dream come true, but also like, oh my goodness, what the heck am I going to do? I have to write a book now. 55,000 succinct words that make sense and go together so it doesn't end up in the bargain bin at the Dollar Tree. Not that those aren't valuable books, but you know what I mean. And so I ended up hiring my writing coach to help me again, because little known fact, at least this has been my experience, I signed my contract for my book, and they were like, see you in 6 months. See, it's due October 1st, 55,000 words on October 1st. And I was like, I've never done this before. So Anne worked me through, and I wrote the book, and she helped me edit it and get it all refined. And I will say, now working with my editor, that was so valuable, because my book manuscript, when I turned it in, was as good as it could be. It had another set of eyes on it to help me refine the message and all those sorts of things. But that entire experience, this is a long story for why I picked the word accountability. That entire experience reminded me again the power of coaching and accountability. The funny and ironic thing is, the last job I had as a teacher, so I was a teacher for 5 years, and then the last year I was an instructional coach. Basically, I was a coach to help teachers refine their practice. And at the time, I knew it was valuable, but until I had sat on the other side of it and received the coaching and the help, I realized again how valuable coaching is, right? A good coach can make so much help. And so this year was a tough year economically. We've all felt it in different ways, right? From the grocery store to maybe the gas pump to maybe if you own a small business, you understand. Like at one point this year, our sales were down 70%. That is not an exaggeration. I mean, I was literally like, are we going to have to close up shop? And it seemed counterintuitive, but I decided to hire a business coach. I had done some mentoring in the past. I'd done some small group coaching in the past. And again, my friend Crystal, it's amazing. She always has the best recommendations. She had a business coach. And so I asked if I could have her name and interview with her. And Allie Worthington ended up being my business coach. And it has been so good at keeping me accountable, staying the course. And one of the things that she's really taught me is that we don't pivot and change in good times. And Simple Purposeful Living had ridden the wave of good times in 2020, 21, 22, into 2023. And now it was like, okay, we didn't really pivot because things were good. Now we need to pivot and tweak and change because it's hard. And I was able to, like, we were able to do that together, right? And I did that because I had the accountability and I wasn't doing it alone, which was so helpful. As a result of my work with Allie, one day she said to me, Erin, you hired me to tend to your business. Why haven't you hired somebody to tend to your soul? Because I had expressed to her that I have suffered from anxiety ever since I was a little girl. I had an eating disorder. We walked through the pandemic. I ended up on an anti-anxiety medication during that time. We've obviously adopted. I've moved every 2 years. I mean, there's just been a lot in my life that I've never gotten counseling for. So people always ask me, like, what was the breaking point? What was the thing that made you go to counseling this year? And that was literally what she said to me was, why haven't you hired somebody to tend to your soul? Is there anything more important? And the answer was no. And so I made the call and she held me accountable, and I had to report back the next week that I had made the phone call to a counselor, and I started attending. And I will tell you, it was one of the hardest and scariest things to walk in that first day, because it was like I was holding on to this shred of I can do it myself. And basically I had to admit, like, I need help. And that's hard for us, right? As women, as achievers. I'm a firstborn daughter, like, I can do it. That's my mantra. And it was kind of that last bit of like, actually I can't. And that's okay. It was a huge humbling moment for me. And from there, then I ended up hiring a trainer 2 times a week to help me with strength training because I'm in my 40s now. And well, things just change in your 40s. If you're not there yet, you wake up, injured sometimes. And that's been a blessing for me. Amy lives down the road, and so I get to walk to training sessions with her. And then we also hired a financial planner to help us with estate planning. I've always been scared to have a will and estate plan because my aunt died young, leaving behind two young children. And in my head, this is something that I've been dealing with at counseling. In my head, I was like, if I do that, I'm basically willing that to happen, which is not true. But we believe these lies in our heads until somebody helps us work through that. So we also did that, and that has been a blessing too. Scott's always been the financial person. He's kind of helped I have all the passwords and all that stuff, but he kind of was handling it. It's really nice because now we have this third party where we're all on the same page. We kind of have these quarterly meetings where we talk about our finances and where things are going and all of that kind of stuff. And then it's helped Scott and I with having a monthly budget, which has been paramount in easing the anxiety and financial stress for me because I'm the primary spender. And so, anyway, this is getting long, but all that to say, if there was an area of my life where I could get accountability, I got accountability in 2024. And I have learned a lot in the process. So, that is my word of the year. So, my question to you would be, what is your word of the year and why? Okay, the next question, and I've kind of already touched on this, but I think it's good because maybe you won't have touched on it with your word, is what was the hardest thing you faced in 2024 and what did you learn as a result? I already kind of mentioned this, but I think that when we look back on our life in the highs and the lows, if you look back and you say, okay, these are the three top moments in my life, and these are the three lowest moments in my life. Which moments did you learn the most? And hands down for me, the hardest moments are where I learn the most, right? It's where we have to dig in into our faith, into our resilience, into our not giving up, right? And those hard moments make us tweak, they make us pivot, they make us stronger, they make us braver, all of those sorts of things. And so I would say this year, the hard moments of the economic times, going to counseling, I have learned a lot as a result. I'm a better wife, better mom, better friend, um, as a result of digging in and doing the hard things this year. So, what is the hardest thing you have faced in 2024, and what have you learned as a result? Okay, the next question. So we went from the depths. Remember, I told you the depths to the heights. What are the top things? What was the highlight of the year for you, either professionally or personally? I would say professionally, one of the hardest things I did this year and one of the most rewarding was writing my first book. I will tell you, it is literally like birthing a baby. There was times where my mom was like, "You're at centimeter number 6, Erin. You can do it. You're almost in active labor." And I was like, "Thank you." And I remember I turned in that book manuscript, all 56,785 words. I pushed send and I burst into tears. It was the most surreal moment of my life. I told my writing coach it felt like I was standing on the podium. It didn't even matter if I didn't get a gold medal. I had finished, and it was a lifelong dream, and I had managed to do it. And it was like just this moment of like, I did the hard thing. And it was so rewarding. So fun to be able to do that this year. I wouldn't have gotten to do that without all of you because the SPL squad is a huge reason I get to do what I do. So thank you very much for that. And then I think personally, I always go back to, I actually just saw a quote the other day, a statistic that said most kids' very first memory between 5 and 10 is some sort of family vacation they went on. And I would say, hands down in my own life, my favorite memories growing up were traveling. I got the blessing of growing up for a couple of years in Lausanne, Switzerland, and we traveled all over Europe. And I did not nearly appreciate the blessing of that until I was an adult. That was just life when I was a kid. But the thing I took away from that as a child was traveling with my kids. We get away, We put our phones down, we put the obligations of work away, the obligations of home away, and we're just together. Whether that's we went on a summer road trip and we went to Chicago, Detroit, and the Michigan North Shore. Scott and I got away to a resort outside of Vegas. We spent some time at the lake. We spent some time in Arizona with my family. All of that was just such a gifted time. And I will say, now that Solon is a freshman in high school, I'm like looking at the opportunities to travel together are slimming, right? And my parents have always said, do it, travel with your kids for as long as you can, for as long as they'll let you. And that's kind of our mantra. Um, and so I would just say that was a highlight of this year and something that we're looking forward to doing more of in 2025. We already have a vacation on the books for spring break, and we'll spend a lot of time at the lake next summer as well. Okay, next question. Okay, so that was what was the highlight of your year, both personally and professionally. Next question. What do you want to take with you into 2025? Like, what is the lessons of 2024 that you want to take with you? And I think the biggest lesson for me that I learned over and over again is you never get where you're going alone. Having a tremendous support system is invaluable to helping you just not only live your life, but live success, like live with success, live with accountability. I think that's so important. I also think another big one is resilience. I've oftentimes equated myself to that little Wii, and I don't know, this is probably like an outdated analogy now because nobody plays Wii, but remember when we had the Wii boxing? And you would box, and the guy would kind of like fade out and fall over, and then he'd kind of like rise back up. They've always said I've kind of been that way. Like people kind of count me out and then I kind of come back. And I think that resilience, when we build that resilience muscle, it helps us to flex our fear muscle. It helps us to just keep going and doing the hard thing and trying new things. I think that's really important. And something I want to take with me into 2025. What do you want to take with you? Okay, the next question is, what do you want to let go of as you move into 2025? One of the things that I really was working on this last year, whether that was in business coaching or in counseling, is comparison. Man, it's the thief of all joy. And it was interesting because I can't remember which person, if it was my counselor or Allie, pointed it out to me. But she asked me, when do you tend to compare the most? And this was eye-opening to me. I tended to compare when I was the most insecure about whatever it was. So if it was a moment of insecurity in my parenting, if it was a moment of insecurity in my business, if it was a moment of insecurity in my appearance, because I struggle with that. It's always in my own insecurity. And so rather than like looking outward to fix it, like how can I then work through those insecurities internally so that I'm not comparing myself to others? Because so often we see others through this, I think of it like a door, and we're looking through like the little lock, the little peephole. We see this much, like literally like half an inch of a person's life, and we just assume everything is golden for them, right? And part of that is because much of what we happens in our life doesn't just happen to us in isolation, which means it's not always my story to tell. I mean, there has been hard stuff this year, but many of the stories are not mine to tell, right? And so it's really easy then for us to compare somebody online because all we see is this little sliver of their life, and we assume that's the entire story. And so just really working through that, working through my own insecurities, I think will really help as we move into 2025. So what is it that you want to let go of? Okay. And then this is the last question for this part. What is a habit that you either want to break or make in 2025? And so I like to start small, and this is kind of something we'll touch on as we close out this episode. But I like to start small. And so I was really thinking of a time in my day that feels frustrating or it doesn't feel like I want it to feel. And that's early in the morning. I used to get up, have a cup of coffee, do my devotions and my gratitude journal. Full disclosure, we schedule all of the graphics at 6 a.m. that you see on social media. Those are all scheduled. Okay. Carrie, my assistant, I tell her what I want. It's like a teacher. I plan out the content. I tell her these are the things, and then she schedules it all out for me. So I'm not actually putting it on there. But for whatever reason, I just feel like I need to make sure it's on there and that, you see it, whatever. It's silly. Nothing earth-shattering. But I get my phone, and then what ends up happening is I check that, and then I'm just on my phone as opposed to doing the other stuff. I've gotten into a good habit of plugging my phone in at night and reading before bed, so, I'm not just doom scrolling at night. But that morning time was becoming that. And it's funny because just this week, as I've been thinking about that, I've been reorienting, and it's hard because you just want you just want to grab for your phone. But I found the last couple of days of just redoing this habit of leaving my phone on the hook until I take my kids to school, which means the first hour and a half, I'm not on my phone at all. I found that I was so much less anxious. I felt like I had so much more peace. I was less short with my kids. I was just calmer, all because I wasn't distracted by my phone. It's such a tiny tweak, but it made such a monumental difference. So that is something a habit I'm going to both break and make in 2024 and go phone free for the first hour and a half of my day before I take the kids to school. I just think it is such a good way, an intentional way to start the day. And I found such benefit with not ending my day with my phone as well. Okay, so those are the questions. I hope that you kind of reflected and thought about along with me. As we go into New Year's, whether you are a New Year's resolution person or not, I have a blog post, an article on our website talking about tiny tweaks you can make going into the new year. I'm a huge proponent of starting small, seeing success and building on that. And the idea is that when we throw a bunch of pebbles, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do this. When we throw a bunch of pebbles into the pond, it makes just little ripples. But if we choose one thing to really focus on, that boulder makes a huge ripple because then we're finding success. We're motivated to continue to do other things. We can stack on top of good habits, all of those sorts of things. So just starting small, like with that one habit that you want to break or make, start there, see success, and let that momentum carry you with purpose into the new year. I think that that is so helpful. And that's just, even if you're thinking along the lines of what is something that's overwhelming to me? I was just coaching a woman in DMs the other day, and she said, Erin, I just feel overwhelmed by my life. And I was like, great. That's normal. Okay, let's walk through it. What is a part of your day that feels overwhelming to you? And she noted that it was her mornings too. I really do think mornings set the tone for our day. So I said, okay, what do you think it is about the morning? She said, well, I wake up with my kids. They're very demanding right away in the morning. And so I said, okay, what can we do either the night before, since, sleep is I get it. I woke up with my kids too when they were little, so that you can get your cup of coffee in you. They're doing something, and then you can carry on with your day. And I said, one of the things we did is that I gave my kids 5 jobs that they could do independently. And yes, there was a little bit of onboarding while we trained them. Like, you need to get up, you need to brush your teeth, you need to get dressed, you need to take your laundry downstairs. Then you can, before you get breakfast or whatever, do your hair, put on your socks and shoes. Yes, we put our socks and shoes on before breakfast because that gives me about 15 minutes where they're just doing their own thing and I can kind of come online as well. And that just really helped her because then she was able to have her coffee. They were able to do some independent activities. And then she ended up coming up with a craft box that the kids could get out and they could do their own crafts independently. They set a timer for 10 to 15 minutes. And then when that timer went off, then they could talk to their mom and show their mom all their creations and all that kind of stuff. So just thinking about what is overwhelming you. And then what is a tiny tweak that you could make to simplify, to help, whatever it is, and then try it. And then if it doesn't work, tweak your way to making it work, just little by little. Oftentimes we want a big solution. Like, we have a big problem, we want a big solution. And what I have found over and over and over again in my life, it is the tiniest change that makes the biggest impact. Going to counseling, The tiniest, honestly, it feels like a big solution, but it was a tiny change. I just had to make a phone call and start therapy, hiring a business coach, hiring a writing coach. All these tiny little changes really do add up. And here's the thing, progress over perfection. Very much of life is not perfect. And if we're waiting for perfect, we're going to be waiting a long time. Done is better than none, and some is better than none. I'm a big proponent of, if you want to walk every day in January, but you only walk 25 days, that is 25 more days than you would have walked if you hadn't had that goal. And so celebrating the progress as opposed to not celebrating. And our knee-jerk reaction is to always focus on the one negative thing, on the thing that we didn't accomplish, but really retraining our mind to see that progress and to celebrate that progress really helps us as well. Okay. I hope that these ideas help you process everything, reflect what were the things that happened in 2024? What were the lessons I learned? What were the things I want to take away? What are the habits I want to make and break in 2025? And then how can I do that in a small way, celebrate the progress and not focus on perfection so that I can tweak my way to a life that I love to live? That is a lot to think about, but I hope I gave you the space within these minutes of this podcast for you to do that, to kind of think about where you've been and where you're going and what you want to set the trajectory. Because the good news about a new year is it is a blank slate, a blank page full of opportunity for us to figure things out. And the thing I love about a pencil is it has an eraser. So if at first it doesn't work out, you just erase and try again. That's the power of a tweak. All right, friends, I will leave you with that, thinking about where you've been and where you're going. And I hope that it encourages you to see what you've learned this year and that you are not the person that you were at the beginning of the year. And you've grown, you're more resilient, you're stronger, and you're braver than you were at the beginning of the year. And I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful that you tune in every week. And I will see you next week as we start a new 4-week challenge all about meal planning. And I'm looking forward to doing that with you because it's going to simplify your life when you know what's on the dinner table every single night. All right, friends, remember, you don't have to overhaul your life to love it when one simple tweak will do. If you liked this episode, it would mean so much if you'd share it with a friend or leave a quick rating and review so others can find our show. Until next time, you can find me at Simple Purposeful Living on Instagram and Facebook.